The silver-blue hands of Zara trembled slightly as she adjusted the communication array. Aboard her sleek Zalarian vessel, the starlight streaming through the viewing portal cast ethereal patterns across her luminescent skin, highlighting the delicate ridges that marked her as nobility among her people. Her violet eyes, large and expressive in the way that had captivated diplomats across 3 star systems, focused intently on the human broadcast she had been studying for weeks. And that, ladies, is exactly how a woman should thank her man when he's been good to her, the human female on the entertainment program laughed, her voice crackling through the translation matrix. Sometimes actions speak louder than words, if you know what I mean. A little appreciation goes a long way, especially when it comes from the heart and shows in how you treat him. Zara paused the recording, her elegant fingers dancing over the holographic controls. As the Zalarian Empire's youngest diplomatic envoy, she had been tasked with understanding human culture. Before the historic peace summit on Kepler Station, the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. Her people had maintained cautious distance from the rapidly expanding human colonies, but recent territorial disputes demanded resolution through diplomacy rather than warfare. The cultural briefings had been extensive, but this particular broadcast intrigued her. Human emotional expression seemed so different from Zalarian formal protocols, where her people valued structured ceremony and precise ritual. Humans appeared to communicate through spontaneous gestures and physical demonstrations. This casual discussion of gratitude between partners suggested a depth of cultural significance she needed to understand. Her meditation was interrupted by the sharp whine of proximity alarms. Zara's training kicked in immediately, her hands flying to the defensive controls as she scanned the tactical display. 3 ships, running dark with energy signatures she didn't recognize, were closing fast on an intercept course. The sleek vessels bore the angular markings of the Corvan Syndicate, notorious pirates who had been raiding shipping lanes in this sector. Zalarian diplomatic vessel, you are ordered to surrender your cargo and prepare for boarding, came the harsh transmission. In Galactic Standard, resistance will be met with extreme force. Zara's jaw tightened. Her ship was fast and well shielded, but it was designed for diplomacy, not combat. The elegant curves that made it a symbol of peace, full intentions also made it vulnerable to military assault. She could try to run, but the Corvan ships were already in weapons range. The first plasma burst rocked her vessel, sending cascades of sparks from the control panels. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in crimson as she fought to maintain course. And shields, a second impact nearly threw her from her seat, and she realized with growing alarm that her diplomatic immunity meant nothing to these raiders. Mayday, mayday, she transmitted on all frequencies, her usually melodious voice tight with controlled fear. This is diplomatic vessel Star Whisper requesting immediate assistance. Under attack by Corvan raiders at coordinates 7-7-Mark-9. The response came faster than she had dared hope. A human voice, steady and confident, crackled through the communication system. Star Whisper, this is Captain Jake Morrison aboard the cargo hauler Wandering Star. Hold tight. We're coming in fast. Through her damaged sensors, Zara watched a human vessel drop out of hyperspace with the kind of precision that spoke of military training. The ship was larger than hers, but clearly built for utility rather than elegance. Its hull bore the scars of hard use among the frontier colonies, but it moved with surprising grace as it positioned itself between her ship and the raiders. Corvan vessels, this is Captain Morrison, came Jake's voice, broadcast on open channels. You're attacking a diplomatic envoy under the protection of the Frontier Defense Compact. Stand down immediately or face the consequences. The lead raider's response was a concentrated barrage aimed at the human ship, but Jake Morrison was clearly no ordinary cargo hauler captain. His vessel twisted through the hostile fire with combat maneuvers that would have impressed Zalarian fleet commanders. Return fire from the Wandering Star was precise and devastating, crippling the lead attacker's weapons systems within seconds. I said stand down. Jake's voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Next warning comes through your engine core. The remaining raiders retreated, apparently deciding that whatever cargo they might claim wasn't worth facing a clearly experienced combat veteran. As the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Zara found herself staring at her unlikely savior through the view screen. The Wandering Star's captain was younger than his confident voice had suggested, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years on the frontier. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from the combat, and his brown eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. When he smiled at her through the communication link, there was warmth there that transcended species barriers, everyone intact. "Over there, Star Whisper?" Jake asked, genuine concern evident in his tone. "Yes, Captain Morrison," Zara replied, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure despite her racing pulse. "Your intervention was most timely. I am Zara Vexthali, diplomatic envoy of the Zalarian Empire. Pleasure to meet you, Ambassador," Jake said, and she noticed he didn't use the formal address protocols her people expected. There was something refreshing about his casual respect. "Your ship's showing some damage on my sensors. My mechanic can patch you up if you'd like to, Doc." Protocol demanded she politely decline and continue to her destination. But her ship's systems were indeed compromised, and Jake Morrison had just saved her life. In Zalarian culture, such a debt carried profound significance. More than that, she found herself curious about this human who fought like a warrior, but spoke with the gentle confidence of a diplomat. That would be most appreciated, she heard herself saying. An hour later, Zara stood in the docking bay of the Wandering Star, watching Jake approach with the easy stride of someone comfortable in his own space. The ship's interior was functional but clean, with modifications that spoke of practical experience rather than imperial resources. Jake himself was even more impressive in person, his presence filling the space with quiet authority. "Welcome aboard," he said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. When she took it, his touch was warm and surprisingly gentle for someone with such obvious strength. "My crew's already started on your engine diagnostics. Should have you ready to fly within a few hours. I am in your debt, Captain Morrison," Zara said formally, using the ritual phrase that carried deep meaning among her people. "Such service requires proper acknowledgement according to custom." Something flickered in Jake's expression, though she couldn't interpret it. Just doing what anyone would do, no debt necessary. But Zara knew better. In saving her life, this human had created an obligation that could only be discharged through meaningful gratitude. The question was how to properly thank him according to his cultural traditions. The broadcast she had been studying suddenly took on new significance. Perhaps this was exactly the situation that required the kind of heartfelt appreciation that human women showed their protectors. As Jake led her through the ship, pointing out various systems and making casual conversation, Zara found herself studying him with new interest. His easy confidence was appealing, so different from the rigid formality of Zalarian nobles. When he laughed at something she said, the sound was warm and genuine, making her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with diplomatic protocol. "You can use the guest quarters to rest while we work on your ship," Jake said, showing her to a small but comfortable cabin. "Dinner's at 1900 hours if you're interested. Nothing fancy, but it's edible." Alone in the quarters, Zara reflected on the strange turn her mission had taken. She had come to study human culture from a distance, but now found herself intimately involved with a representative of their species. Jake Morrison embodied many of the qualities the intelligence reports had mentioned about humans: resourcefulness, courage, and an almost instinctive drive to help others. More intriguingly, he embodied qualities the dry reports had failed to capture. There was something magnetic about his presence, a warmth that made her want to understand him better. When he looked at her, she didn't see the cautious respect most species showed the Zalarian Empire. Instead, she saw genuine interest, as if he found her fascinating as an individual rather than as a diplomatic symbol. The memory of the human broadcast returned to her thoughts. The woman had spoken of showing gratitude through actions rather than words, of appreciation that came from the heart. Perhaps this was her opportunity to bridge the cultural gap between their species while properly acknowledging the debt she owed. As she prepared for dinner, Zara found herself wondering what Jake Morrison would think of Zalarian gratitude customs. More importantly, she wondered what he would think of her. The dining hall of the Wandering Star was modest but welcoming, with warm lighting that made Zara's silver-blue skin seem to glow with inner radiance. Jake had changed from his work clothes into a simple but clean shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders, and she found herself stealing glances at him as they shared what he had modestly called nothing fancy. The meal was a revelation. Human cuisine was far more complex and flavorful than the nutrition reports had suggested. Jake had prepared something he called frontier stew with vegetables and protein sources she didn't recognize, but the combination of spices and textures created a symphony on her tongue. "This is remarkable," Zara said, her violet eyes bright with genuine pleasure. Solarian cuisine tends to be more structured, each element served separately according to traditional combinations. Jake smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "My grandmother's recipe, actually. She always said food tastes better when it's made with care for the people you're sharing it with." He paused, seeming to realize the intimacy of the statement. "I mean, for guests, hospitality, and all that." The slight flush that colored his cheeks was endearing, and Zara felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the meal. This human was unlike anyone she had encountered during her diplomatic training, where most beings either treated her with excessive formality due to her rank, or showed barely concealed fear of her people's reputation. Jake spoke to her as if she were simply herself. "Tell me about your world," Jake said, leaning back in his chair with the relaxed posture that seemed natural to humans. "The briefings always focus on politics and trade agreements. What's it really like to live there?" Zara considered the question carefully. Most inquiries about Solarian society focused on military capabilities or technological resources, but Jake's eyes held genuine curiosity about her as a person, not just as a representative of her species. "Solaria Prime is beautiful in ways that are difficult to describe," she began, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. "The cities are grown rather than built, shaped from living crystal that responds to emotional resonance. When the population is content, the structures glow with warm light. During festivals, entire districts pulse with rhythms that match the collective heartbeat of the inhabitants." "That sounds incredible," Jake said softly. "Living architecture that responds to feelings. It must make deception nearly impossible." "Indeed," Zara laughed, a musical sound that made Jake's breath catch. "Privacy is achieved through emotional discipline rather than physical barriers. We learn from childhood to control our inner responses, to present only what we choose to reveal." "And what are you choosing to reveal now?" Jake asked, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. The question hung between them, charged with possibilities. Zara felt her skin's natural luminescence brighten slightly, a physiological response she couldn't quite control. Jake's eyes widened with interest rather than alarm, and she realized he found her alien nature fascinating rather than disturbing. "More than I intended," she admitted, her usual diplomatic composure slipping. "You have a way of making conversation feel safe. It's not something I'm accustomed to." Jake reached across the table, his fingers barely brushing hers. The contact sent electricity through her entire nervous system, a sensation unlike anything in her previous experience. Human skin was warmer than Solarian, with a different texture that was oddly compelling. "I'm glad," he said simply. "I was worried you might be uncomfortable here. Different gravity, atmosphere, everything. The environmental differences are minor," Zara replied, acutely aware that she hadn't pulled away from his touch. "But the cultural ones are significant." "Such as?" Zara hesitated, remembering the broadcast that had originally brought her to study human customs. The debt of gratitude still weighed on her, and she found herself increasingly curious about how humans expressed appreciation for such profound services. "The way your people show gratitude," she said carefully. "I've been studying human customs, trying to understand proper protocols for acknowledgement." Jake's expression grew puzzled. "Acknowledgement of what?" "You saved my life," Zara said, her voice taking on the formal cadence she used during diplomatic functions. Such a service creates an obligation that must be properly discharged. "I need to understand how human women express appropriate gratitude to their male protectors." Understanding dawned in Jake's eyes, followed by something that looked suspiciously like amusement. "Zara, you don't owe me anything. I helped because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected payment, but the cultural protocols." She began. "What cultural protocols?" Jake asked gently. "Where exactly did you learn about human gratitude customs?" Heat rose in Zara's cheeks, causing her skin to shimmer with embarrassment. "I intercepted a broadcast, an educational program about relationships between human males and females. The speaker was quite explicit about the proper way for women to show appreciation." Jake's eyes widened with realization. "Oh, Zara, I think you might have been watching entertainment programming, not educational material. Humans have a lot of fictional content about relationships that doesn't necessarily reflect real customs." The mortification was almost unbearable. She had misunderstood completely, basing her cultural analysis on what was apparently fantasy rather than fact. Her diplomatic training hadn't prepared her for this kind of humiliation. "I see," she said stiffly, starting to rise from the table. "I apologize for the misunderstanding. I should return to my quarters." Jake's hand closed gently over hers, preventing her retreat. "Hey, wait. There's nothing to apologize for. Cultural misunderstandings happen all the time, even between humans. Sit down, please." The warmth in his voice, free of mockery or condescension, made her hesitate. Slowly, she settled back into her chair, though she couldn't quite meet his eyes. "Look at me," Jake said softly, when she reluctantly raised her gaze. His expression was kind rather than amused. "You want to know about real human gratitude? It's usually pretty simple. A sincere thank you. Maybe a hug if we're comfortable with each other. Sometimes we cook a meal or give a gift that shows we were thinking about the person." "That's all?" Zara asked, surprised by the simplicity. "That's all," Jake confirmed. "Though I have to say, the fact that you were worried about proper protocol is probably the sweetest thing anyone's ever done for me. Most people just assume their way is the right way." The warmth in his voice was doing strange things to her equilibrium. "I wanted to honor your customs," she said quietly. "You risked your life for mine. That deserves proper recognition." Jake was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her pulse race. "Can I ask you something? This gratitude thing, is it really about cultural protocol? Or is there something else going on here?" The question pierced through her diplomatic training to something much more personal. She had been thinking about Jake Morrison since the moment he had appeared to rescue her, and it had very little to do with obligation or cultural exchange. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt quite like this before." Jake's thumb traced across her knuckles, sending shivers through her entire body. "Like what?" "Fascinated," she said, the word coming out more breathless than she intended. "Drawn to someone in a way that has nothing to do with diplomatic necessity or political advantage. You intrigue me, Jake Morrison." "Good," he said, his smile transforming his face into something that made her heart skip beats. "Because you're the most interesting person I've met in years. And it has nothing to do with you being Zalarian royalty. I'm not royalty." She protested automatically. "You carry yourself like you are," Jake said. "But right now, sitting here, talking with me, you're just Zara, and I like Zara a lot." The compliment hit her like a physical force. She had spent her entire life being valued for her diplomatic skills, her family connections, her usefulness to the Zalarian Empire. But Jake saw her as an individual worth knowing, worth spending time with. "I like Jake Morrison too," she said, surprised by her own boldness. "More than I probably should." "Why shouldn't you?" he asked, leaning closer across the table. "Because I'm supposed to be establishing formal diplomatic relations, not getting personally involved with humans," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Because my people expect me to maintain proper emotional distance. Because this is complicated, in ways I can't even begin to calculate. And," Jake prompted, "and I find myself not caring about any of that when I'm with you," she finished, the admission feeling like jumping off a cliff. Jake's response was to stand up and walk around the table, offering her his hand. "Would you like to see the observation deck? The stars are beautiful from there." Zara took his hand without hesitation, allowing him to help her to her feet. The casual contact, that had seemed so foreign hours earlier now felt natural, right in a way that transcended species differences. The observation deck was a small compartment with transparent walls that offered a stunning view of the surrounding nebula. Stars wheeled slowly past as the ship maintained its course, painting everything in soft multicolored light. "It's magnificent," Zara breathed, moving to the viewing wall. "It is," Jake agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her rather than the stars. The realization sent heat coursing through her veins. She turned to face him fully, acutely aware of how close they were standing, how the starlight played across his features. "Jake," she said softly, not sure what she was asking for. He seemed to understand anyway. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs tracing the delicate ridges that marked her heritage. "Beautiful," he murmured, and she knew he meant it. When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with all the passion she had been trying to contain. He tasted like the spices from dinner, and something uniquely him that made her want more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zara realized that her entire understanding of gratitude had been completely transformed. "Is this how humans usually say thank you?" she asked, her voice husky with desire. Jake's laugh was warm against her lips. "Only when they mean it," he said, before kissing her again. The emergency klaxon that shattered the peaceful moment on the observation deck brought both Jake and Zara crashing back to reality. Red warning lights bathed the transparent walls as Jake's communication device crackled to life with urgent transmissions. "Captain Morrison, we've got multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace," came the voice of his engineer. "Solarian and human vessels, both broadcasting military frequencies. They're demanding to speak with you immediately." Jake cursed under his breath, his hands still resting protectively on Zara's waist. "How many ships?" "6 total. 3 human, colonial defense cruisers and 3 Zolarian battle frigates, sir. They're not here for a friendly chat." Zara's skin had gone pale, her luminescence dimming with obvious distress. "They've found me," she whispered. "My escort fleet was supposed to maintain distance, but if human ships are here too, this isn't good," Jake said grimly, already moving toward the bridge. "Both our governments think something's gone wrong." The bridge of the Wandering Star was cramped with the addition of multiple communication channels broadcasting simultaneously. Admiral Harrison's weathered face glowered from the human fleet transmission, while Commander Velter of the Zolarian forces appeared on an adjacent screen, his silver features set in rigid disapproval. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Harrison barked, without preamble, "you are harboring a foreign dignitary without proper authorization. Prepare to transfer the Zolarian envoy to our custody immediately. Ambassador Vexthali belongs under Zolarian protection," Commander Velter countered, his violet eyes flashing with barely contained aggression. "Captain Morrison, you will release our diplomat at once or face the consequences of your interference." Jake felt Zara's hand slip into his, her fingers trembling slightly despite her outward composure. The simple contact strengthened his resolve in ways that surprised him. These military commanders saw only political chess pieces, but he saw the woman who had laughed at his stories over dinner, who had kissed him with passion that transcended species barriers. "With respect to both fleets," Jake said, his voice carrying the authority he had learned commanding merchant vessels in dangerous territories, "Ambassador Vexthali is aboard my ship by choice. Her vessel was damaged during a pirate attack, and she's my guest until repairs are complete." "Irrelevant," Admiral Harrison snapped. "The Colonial Defense Force has protocols for diplomatic incidents. The ambassador will be transferred to proper facilities for debriefing. The Zolarian Empire does not recognize human authority over our citizens." Commander Velter replied coldly, "Ambassador Vexthali will return with us immediately." Zara stepped forward, her diplomatic training overriding personal concerns. "Commanders, I appreciate your concern for my welfare, but Captain Morrison speaks truthfully. I am here voluntarily and have been treated with the utmost respect." "Ambassador," Commander Velter's tone carried subtle reproach, "your mission parameters did not include extended contact with human personnel. The Empire expects your immediate return for proper debriefing. The colonial government has similar concerns, Admiral Harrison added. Unauthorized diplomatic contact could jeopardize the upcoming peace negotiations. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. Both sides were treating Zara like property to be claimed rather than a person capable of making her own decisions. The protective instinct that had driven him to rescue her from pirates now flared against these supposed allies. Maybe you should ask the ambassador what she wants instead of making demands, Jake said, his voice carrying an edge that made both commanders' expressions darken. Captain Morrison. Admiral Harrison's tone carried clear warning. You are a civilian contractor, not a diplomatic negotiator. Stand down and comply with military directives. Jake, Zara said softly, her hand squeezing his in warning. But when he looked at her, he saw something that changed everything. Her violet eyes were bright with unshed tears, but beneath the diplomatic mask was a woman fighting for something precious. No, Jake said firmly, surprising everyone including himself. I won't stand down. The stunned silence from both fleets was deafening. Jake Morrison, cargo hauler and occasional frontier troubleshooter, had justified the military commands of two interstellar governments. Captain, Commander Vulter's voice dropped 2 dangerous levels. You are interfering with Zalarian internal affairs and you're threatening a human civilian, Admiral Harrison added, which could be considered an act of war. Stop, Zara's voice rang out with surprising force, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. Both of you, just stop treating us like we're incapable of making our own decisions. The passion in her voice seemed to surprise both commanders, but she continued before either could respond. Commander Velter, I have completed my cultural research and I am prepared to provide comprehensive reports on human customs and capabilities. Admiral Harrison, I have maintained strict diplomatic protocols throughout my stay aboard Captain Morrison's vessel. Both of your concerns are noted and unnecessary. Ambassador, Commander Velter began, but Zara cut him off. I am not finished, she said, her skin beginning to glow with the emotional resonance Jake had learned to recognize. For the past day, I have learned more about human nature than months of intelligence briefings provided. Captain Morrison represents the best qualities of his species: courage, compassion, and an instinctive drive to protect others regardless of personal cost. Jake felt his heart skip as she turned to look at him, her eyes bright with emotion. More than that, she continued, her voice softening. I have discovered that genuine connection transcends species barriers. The upcoming peace negotiations will succeed not because of military posturing or political maneuvering, but because beings like Captain Morrison prove that cooperation is not only possible, but natural when we see each other as individuals rather than representatives. Admiral Harrison's expression had shifted from anger to thoughtful consideration. Ambassador, are you suggesting that your time aboard the Wandering Star has diplomatic value? I am stating that it has personal value, Zara replied boldly, and that sometimes personal connections create stronger foundations for peace than formal treaties. Commander Vulter's violet eyes narrowed with understanding. Ambassador Vexthali, are you declaring romantic attachment to this human? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake felt Zara's hand tighten in his, and he realized this was the moment that would determine their future. Political considerations, military concerns, and diplomatic protocols all faded beside the simple truth of what had grown between them. Yes, Zara said clearly, her luminescence brightening until she seemed to glow from within. I am. The reactions from both fleets were immediate and chaotic. Admiral Harrison began barking orders about unprecedented diplomatic situations, while Commander Vulter's expression cycled through surprise, consideration, and what might have been approval. Ambassador, the Zalarian commander said finally, such declarations carry significant political implications. I am aware, Zara replied steadily. I am also aware that the Zalarian Empire values strength of conviction and the courage to forge new paths. Captain Morrison embodies both qualities. Jake found his voice at last. I love her too, he said, simply, his words cutting through the military chatter. And I don't care what complications that creates for anyone else. Admiral Harrison's laugh was unexpected and surprisingly warm. "Well, I'll be damned, Morrison, you've managed to create either the biggest diplomatic incident in recent history or the most effective peace initiative ever attempted." "Perhaps both," Commander Velter added, his stern expression softening slightly. "Ambassador Vextali, your unconventional methods may indeed prove valuable. The Empire has always respected those who choose difficult paths for worthy causes." Over the following hours, what had begun as a military standoff transformed into an impromptu diplomatic summit. Both fleets maintained position, while their respective governments consulted frantically about the unprecedented situation. Jake and Zara found themselves at the center of discussions that would reshape interstellar relations. The solution, when it came, was elegant in its simplicity. Zara would continue her diplomatic mission with Jake as a cultural liaison, their relationship becoming a symbol of the cooperation both governments claimed to want. The upcoming peace negotiations would proceed with them as joint representatives, proof that understanding was possible across any divide. "It's not going to be easy," Jake warned as they stood once again on the observation deck, watching the mixed fleet escort them toward Kepler Station. "Political relationships never are." "No," Zara agreed, nestled comfortably against his side. "But we'll face it together." Jake tilted her chin up, marveling again at the way starlight seemed to dance in her violet eyes. "Any regrets about your cultural research project?" Zara's smile was radiant as she rose on her toes to kiss him. "Only that it took me so long to understand what human gratitude really means." "And what's that?" Jake asked against her lips. "Sharing your heart with someone worth keeping," she whispered before kissing him again. As their lips met under the light of distant stars, neither noticed the way the mixed fleet around them had unconsciously formed a protective formation. Human and Zalarian ships working in perfect harmony. Sometimes the greatest victories came, not from conquest but from connection, not from dominance, but from the simple courage to love across impossible distances. The peace that followed would be remembered for generations, but those who witnessed its beginning would always speak of the cargo captain and the diplomat, who proved that some forces in the universe were stronger than politics, more enduring than empires, and more powerful than the vast darkness between the stars. Love, as it turned out, really could conquer galaxies.